Remember to like the video, give your opinions, and subscribe to get informed on our most recent news. Storms have always fascinated me. The drama, the sheer strength, the way they disrupt everything and make everything feel fresh once more. But what transpired during that specific storm altered everything. It had nothing to do with thunder or lightning. It was about something completely different, something human, surprising, and incredibly moving. Diane is my name. At 47, I've been residing in the quaint suburban hamlet of Willow Creek for the past 10 years. Though recently I had started to feel restless, as though something was lacking, something I couldn't exactly identify. Life here moves slowly, which I normally find pleasant. Home alone on a Friday night watching a rerun of an old black and white film, the lights flickered and finally went out completely. Wonderful, I thought, searching for candles haphazardly. Exactly what I required. Looking out the window, I saw the wind picking up and bending the trees under a lowering sky. Lighting a few candles, I covered myself in an old quilt my mother had given me years ago and plopped down on the couch, ready to weather the storm. Every drop pounding relentlessly like a rhythmic symphony, the rain began hammering the roof. Suddenly, amid the constant rain beating, I heard a loud banging at my front door. My heart skipped. Who would be outside during a storm like this? Grabbing my torch, I carefully approached the front door and looked through the window. Mark, my neighbor from 2 doors down, stood on my porch, soaked. A quiet, nice guy in his early 50s who usually kept to himself, Mark had moved in a few months back. Though I'd never had a genuine talk with him, we had traded hellos and short banter. Startled by how saturated he was, I opened the door fast. His shirt clung to his chest and his dark hair hung to his forehead. He looked ashamed, his cheeks reddening even in the low candle illumination. "Diane, I'm truly sorry to bother you," he replied, his voice muffled by the screaming wind. "A tree just fell over my driveway, blocking the road totally. My power's out too, and my phone battery's dead. I didn't know where else to go. I acted without thinking. Mark, come in. Out there you're going to catch your death." He walked in and I quickly gave him a large towel. Apologizing once more, he uncomfortably dried off. Though I didn't want to bother, "Nonsense," I said encouragingly. "We're neighbors. What good are we if we can't assist one another in a storm?" Mark's shoulders visibly relaxed at my comments, and I directed him into the living room. His features softened in the candlelight. I had never seen how very blue his eyes were, or how the wrinkles at the corners suggested many untold stories. Still shaking a little, he sat on the sofa. Rubbing his hands together, he said softly, "You'd think at my age I'd be better prepared." I chuckled softly. "Storms always catch us off guard," I said, considering not only the weather, but also my own recent agitated emotions. I gave him a new cup of tea I had somehow brewed prior to the power going off. The warmth restoring color back to his cheeks made him hold it gratefully. We began speaking, first about the storm, then about ourselves, as the wind howled outside. After losing his wife 5 years ago, Mark had just relocated to Willow Creek to start over. I was taken aback by his candor. He spoke softly of his late wife, honoring her memory with gentle respect, yet there was a subtle loneliness that really struck me. I said in exchange that after a marriage that slowly slipped into friendship instead of love, I had been divorced for 7 years. "We grew apart," I said quietly, staring down into my drink. "Funny how loneliness creeps up on you, isn't it?" Mark nodded pensively, his eyes sympathetic and understanding. "The hardest is the quiet," he said in agreement. particularly on evenings like this one. A comforting stillness filled with the rhythm of rain and the soft flicker of candlelight descended between us. I sensed a change inside me, a warmth I hadn't experienced in decades. Still, I was wary, fearing misinterpretation of this newly discovered closeness that seems to come so easily between us. Mark eventually spoke up, his voice low and unsure. "Diane, thanks for allowing me in tonight. You didn't have to." I stretched out instinctively and touched his arm lightly. "I'm glad you knocked," I said truthfully. Truth be told, storms like these serve as a reminder of how alone I often feel. It's good to share it with someone. Mark's hand lay softly over mine, the warmth of his touch sending a faint electric pulse through me. "Me too," he said quietly, looking into my eyes and radiating sincerity with every word. "Talking to you like this has peculiar comfort given I've spent many nights alone recently." Surprised and touched by the unanticipated depth of our relationship, my heart fluttered somewhat. Thunder rolled loudly outside, breaking our stillness and accentuating the gravity of the situation. I found myself attracted to Mark in a manner I hadn't experienced towards anyone in a very long past. But we both started to realize how fragile and unexpected this moment was as the wind howled louder and lightning lit the shadows in the space. Suddenly bashful, a flush appeared on my cheeks. Sensing my uncertainty, Mark softly cleared his throat. "Diane," he whispered gently, ending our shared quiet. "Though I don't want to make your life any more difficult, I would truly love to know you more. Perhaps even see where this goes, if you so desire." His sincerity moved me profoundly, causing me to weep up and fast blink away the tears. "Mark, I would appreciate that. When the storm passes, let us just wait to see how we feel about things." He smiled kindly, his eyes full of understanding. "I agree. No expectations, no pressure. Sitting side by side, sharing tales and silently creating a connection that seemed fresh yet comfortably familiar, we spent the rest of that rainy night. A feeling I had almost forgotten, something in me sparked with hope and potential. The storm was passing both outside and within by the time daylight drew near. But the unanticipated warmth I found with Mark was the genuine shock of the evening, not the furious storm or falling trees. Though I couldn't yet know how much our lives were about to change, I did know one thing for sure. The storm had brought something unexpected into my life, and there was no turning back now. Morning came softly, pouring mild sunlight through my drapes and spreading patterns across the wooden floor. Outside, trees lay strewn in yards, leaves covering the streets, evidence of yesterday night's tumultuous weather. But within my house, the storm's remains told a different story, one of vulnerability, warmth, and unanticipated friendship. Mark had left soon after daylight to evaluate the damage at his home. His presence stayed in my mind long after the door closed behind him. His eyes held mine when he talked. The honest softness in his voice, these subtle aspects played out nonstop in my head, causing me to smile quietly into my morning coffee. Mark came coming slowly down the street that afternoon as I picked up fallen branches from the garden. His steps stopped momentarily at my property border and then started confidently towards me. "Hey again," he shouted, grinning broadly. "Seems like you have a lot of cleaning to do." Brushing stray hair from my face, I chuckled quietly. "It's not too terrible. How's your house looking?" "Not great, to be honest," he murmured, massaging the back of his neck with a rueful smile. "That tree wrecked some of the roof and my fence. I'll be occupied for a time." "Well," I said right away, startling myself, Let me help you. 2 pairs of hands are superior to 1. Mark appeared surprised by my suggestion. Then, a mild appreciation softened his look. Diane, are you certain? You have a lot of your own mess. Playfully daring him, I set my hands squarely on my hips. Certainly. Apart from that, I owe you for last night keeping me company. His face burst into a real smile, wrinkles softly appearing around his blue eyes. That being the case, I humbly accept. Walking side by side towards Mark's house, I found myself thinking about how natural it seemed to be with him, even if our relationship was short. Being with him made me feel an ease I hadn't had in a long time, one that made the work in front of me seem less overwhelming. Mark's property was in bad condition. The huge tree sprawled across his driveway, twisted limbs strewn over the yard, and broken timber all around. Though he was shaking his head a little, he still managed to stay optimistic. I suppose Mother Nature had different ideas for my weekend. We both chuckled quietly, enjoying a moment of shared amusement. Before long, we started cutting and moving branches, removing rubbish, and finally making little piles close to the curb. Hours flew by. Discussion between us flowed smoothly as though we had known one another for decades. Mark spoke more tales from his past during our breaks, and I revealed my own dreams and anxieties, things I hadn't said aloud to anybody in decades. Under the wide sky, the emotional tie that began in the candlelit intimacy of last night expanded steadily, fortified by mutual understanding and quiet trust. Mark's look became pensive as we stopped late in the day, sitting on his porch railing and drinking chilled lemonade. He said softly, "It's amusing, right? Occasionally, the most terrible storms provide the most insight." I looked up to see the pure sky where only hours before clouds had been raging. Turning to look at him, I said quietly, "I was just thinking about something similar." Sometimes, I think, a little turbulence serves as a reminder of how much we long for connection. Mark looked at me, his gaze softly probing my face, maybe noticing the unsaid weakness I had concealed from others for years. "Diane, I've spent a long time convincing myself I didn't need anyone else. That solitude was strength," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Being with you, however, makes me see I've been deceiving myself." His comment's gentle honesty moved me and my breath stuck in my throat. I slowly extended my hand and softly rested it on top of his. From that basic act, warmth radiated from his fingers gently tightening around my own. Looking down at our linked hands, I whispered softly, "Maybe we both needed that storm more than we believed." His voice was soft and reflective. "Perhaps fate, Diane. Life waking us up, telling us what we have been lacking." For a time we stood silently, taking in the gravity of the situation. The quiet was filled with subtle tension, a fragile expectation that communicated more than any words. Mark eventually spoke up quietly, his voice low and personal. "Diane, would it be okay if I took you out for dinner one day? I'd really want to see you again in a more deliberate context." Instantaneously, my heart warmed and my grin spread gradually across my face. "That would be great, Mark." Relief mixed with exhilaration as his visage significantly brightened. "Good," he murmured quietly, chuckling softly. "To be honest, I was anxious you might decline." I held his hand encouragingly. "Not after all we've shared. No chance." Mark's garden was softly illuminated by a golden glow as the sun started to sink towards the horizon, reflecting gently in his eyes. Between us was a newly discovered tenderness, a delicate but strong link neither of us had foreseen. Still, it seemed sincere, clearly genuine. Later that evening, I walked back home feeling lighter and more hopeful. Life had surprised me in the greatest possible way, reminding me how much warmth, generosity, and unanticipated relationships could enhance us, even at times we least expected them. Mark, his kindness, transparency, and real vulnerability, was on my mind as I got ready for bed that evening. I had not felt this optimistic about someone in a very long time. Could this storm really have altered everything? I lacked all the solutions, but for the first time in years, I felt driven to find them. With the gentle murmur of nighttime crickets coming through the open window, I whispered a secret thank you to the storm, to fate, and especially to Mark in the still darkness of my bedroom. Little did I realize the emotional intensity of this trip had only just begun, and what happened next would impact us both in ways we could not yet foresee. Thoughts of Mark flowed softly through every moment of the next 4 days, which flew by. Distracted by memories of our shared talks and the gentle comfort of his presence, I found myself smiling impulsively. At 47, I had not expected to feel like a schoolgirl impatiently waiting for a phone call, but my pulse raced every time I looked towards his house. The day of our meal finally came. Mark had recommended we visit the lovely small Italian restaurant downtown, a warm family-owned business famous for its soft lighting and intimate vibe. It had been long since I had felt this anxious or thrilled. That night, I dressed carefully, selecting a plain yet beautiful blue outfit that highlighted the brilliance in my eyes. I grinned at my mirror reflection, seeing how the excitement had softened my features and given me a young glow I had nearly forgotten. My breath caught as Mark came to fetch me up, waiting at my door with a lovely grin. His black pants matched his strong, quiet attitude. He wore a neat navy button-down shirt with sleeves pulled up casually. He gave me one gently scented, deep crimson rose. Quietly, with sincerity clear in his loving gaze, he said, "Diane, you look lovely." Accepting the rose and breathing in its exquisite perfume, I reddened slightly. "Thanks, Mark. You seem really kind, too." We found a corner table under lovely golden lighting at the restaurant. Soft music in the background set a mood that welcomed closeness and openness. Laughter and times of quiet understanding punctuated natural conversation. Mark's eyes glimmered with soft humor as he remembered his youth, and I told stories from my own history, astonished at how easily vulnerability appeared when speaking to him. Halfway through our meal, Mark's face turned thoughtful and a little uncertainty appeared. Meeting my gaze with deliberate earnestness, he carefully set his fork down. "Diane," he started slowly, "there's something I feel I need to tell you, something that's been on my mind since the storm." I stopped, my heart racing all of a sudden. "Go on," I said gently, attempting to mask the little fear that started to surface. He breathed deeply and slowly, as if collecting his thoughts. Years have passed since I let myself feel this way about someone. Ever since I lost Lisa, my late wife, I've held myself back emotionally. I thought shutting out vulnerability meant protecting myself from pain. But after meeting you, I realized I've been denying myself something essential. His sincerity moved me greatly, and I automatically stretched over the table to softly put my palm on his hand. "Mark, thank you for saying this. After losing someone you loved so much, you have every right to be wary. But vulnerability, letting us feel deeply, is what gives life meaning." His look softened appreciatively, and relief spread over his features. "You're correct, Diane, and that's precisely why this night means so much to me. I'm deciding to open myself up once more, to run the chance of experiencing something significant, with you." His remarks made my heart swell and warmth spread across my chest. "I feel precisely the same," I said quietly, vulnerable but safe in his company. Deep down, I've been yearning genuine connection despite having spent so long pretending I was perfectly well on my own. When you arrived during that storm, I realized what I had been lacking. Savoring the newly found connection between us, we shared a calm moment of mutual understanding, fingers gently interlaced on the tablecloth. We strolled leisurely under softly lighting streetlights across town following dinner. A soft wind stirring leaves around us made the night somewhat cold. My hand located Mark's without deliberate thought. Our fingers intertwined automatically. It seemed appropriate, simple yet very important. Mark stopped as we walked by a little park softly lit by moonlight and turned gently towards me. He reached up to delicately brush a strand of hair from my face in the silent stillness, fingertips lingering softly against my cheek. "Diane," he said softly, his voice real and kind. "Meeting you has reminded me how good it feels to share life with someone else. I didn't expect this. I didn't even think it was feasible. But now that you're here, I don't want to let this feeling go." The honesty evident in his gaze made my breath catch and my heart race faster. "Mark, I don't either. You have opened my heart in ways I believed were gone forever." He inched closer, pausing a little as though waiting for my go-ahead. I lifted my face up without thinking to meet his lips gently. Though soft, our kiss was full of strong, silent intensity that said volumes. The loneliness that had characterized our recent years vanished totally in that one moment under the starry sky. Mark closed his eyes and softly placed his forehead against mine as we separated, as though relishing the profundity of the moment. "I never imagined I'd feel this again," he said softly. Fingers gently stroking the side of his face, I said, "Me either. I appreciate your risk-taking." Walking home hand in hand under the sky made me feel different, lighter, more optimistic, and emotionally awakened. Our unplanned evening had softly opened doors inside both of us, letting warmth and intimacy pour into areas we had kept quite guarded for far too long. Mark stopped at my door and turned to look at me with a soft smile. "Thank you, Diane, for tonight. For all you do." I squeezed his hand lovingly and grinned broadly. "Mark, tonight is only the start. I really believe that." Walking back towards his house warmed my heart with great appreciation. Life had startled me, had astonished us, in a way neither of us had thought conceivable. I felt revitalized, emotionally aroused, and profoundly linked in a way that made my pulse race with anticipation for the future. Little did I know then, our path was only starting and the most deep revelation waited just ahead. Every day more colorful and lively than the last, the weeks that followed appeared to pass in a hazy haze. Mark and I shared long walks, peaceful evenings, and the sort of simple friendship I'd long since forgotten was possible, spending as much time together as we could. Once alone, my world had grown into something considerably more satisfying, richer, warmer. On a bright afternoon, while we sipped coffee on my front porch, Mark looked towards me pensively, his eyes soft yet serious. "Diane, I've been mulling over how odd it is, how our paths intersected that stormy night, almost as if fate decided to intervene." Leaning comfortably against him, I grinned broadly. I felt the same way. A storm was the last thing I expected to bring such joy into my life. He held my hand with tenderness. I didn't either. Years have passed since I felt linked to anyone. Now I cannot picture going back. Distant thunder, an unexpected reminder of the night our trip had started, disrupted our silent thought. Slowly, clouds formed in the sky. Their soft rumbling was a comforting reminder of the beauty possible from disorder. Mark astonished me later that evening by reaching into his wallet for an old picture as rain softly tapped against the window panes. When he gave it to me, his face was gentle and nostalgic. "This was Lisa," he remarked softly, his voice full of respect. "Every day since Mom died, I've carried this picture with me. Tonight seems appropriate to finally let go." I closely inspected the faded picture. Lisa was a nice woman with a sincere, warm smile, someone obviously loved and much valued. Mark's candor made me feel tight in both sympathy and appreciation. "Mark, she was lovely." "She must have been quite unique," I said earnestly. His eyes were thoughtful as he gently shook his head. "She was. She showed me how crucial it is to love openly, without regret. For years, I believed I would never experience that again, but now, Diane, I discovered something amazing with you. You have revived me." Tears clouded my sight as I carefully returned the image to his palm. "Mark, I can't tell you how much it means to me that you shared this. I want to respect what you have had, what you have lost, and value what we are constructing together." His eyes glimmered gently as he stared at me closely. "That's precisely how I feel, Diane. Meeting you has shown me that love is limitless. Our hearts expand. They don't replace. I never thought I could feel this strongly again, but here we are, and it seems perfect." As we held each other gently and rain gently ran over the windows, my heart swelled. It was a time of silent thankfulness, a mutual recognition of loss, development, and the lovely complexity of discovering love once more. Several weeks later, Mark asked me to a weekend trip to a cottage tucked away in the surrounding mountains. Quiet, calm, and profoundly romantic, it was the ideal venue. Under stars so brilliant they looked impossibly near, we hiked beautiful trails, laughed together, and talked profoundly into the night. Mark looked at me on our last night near the crackling fireplace, covered in a beautiful quilt, his gaze warm but vulnerable. "Diane, these last few months have changed me in ways I never imagined. I never thought I'd meet someone who gets me the way you do. You have opened my heart again and given my life more happiness than I ever imagined." Happiness made my eyes wet and emotions surged inside me. "Mark, I feel precisely the same. You have returned me to myself. Now, I cannot picture my life without you in it." He drew a little velvet box from his pocket. Anticipation flooded my chest, and my pulse soared, breath catching. Mark's voice quivered a little. Every syllable showed honesty. "Diane, life brought us together in the most unexpected way. Through a storm, a knockdown tree, and a soft knock on your door. I believe with all my heart that we were intended to find each other. So tonight, I want to ask you, will you marry me?" Nodding fervently and chuckling gently in my happiness, I found tears rolling down my face. "Of course I'll marry you, Mark. Yes, naturally." Then he softly pulled me into his arms after slipping a thin, dazzling ring upon my finger. Joyfully by the warm glow of the fire, we kissed deeply, sealing our dedication to enjoy the unexpected, lovely path life had given us. We told friends and neighbors our joyous news as we returned home. Their congratulations' sincerity reflected the happiness we both experienced profoundly within. Privately, though, we understood that our actual celebration was much quieter, much deeper. A shared awareness of love produced from vulnerability, openness, and emotional fortitude. A few close friends, neighbors, and relatives surrounded us as we married in a tiny, intimate ceremony in our lawn some months later. Our vows were honest, sincere, and very emotional, reflecting our path. Standing before Mark and gazing into his eyes, I knew without a doubt that this storm, both literal and emotional, had taken us precisely where we needed to be. Mark gently grasped my hand later that evening as darkness fell softly about us and smiled at me lovingly. "Mrs. Anderson, are you ready for whatever follows next?" Feeling really thankful and quite optimistic, I squeezed his hand affectionately. "Mark, facing it together will help me to be ready for anything." Beneath a sky slowly filling with stars, we stood together with hearts bonded by vulnerability, openness, and mutual respect. Our path had been unanticipated, profoundly emotional, and life-changing in ways we never thought imaginable. Facing our future made one thing certain. Together we found something amazing, the bravery to love truly, freely, and without regret. And that was worth every storm we had ever confronted. I stayed next to him, head against his chest, listening to the unrelenting thrum of his beat. Once he touched my hair to smooth it down. Lacking any relevance, he remarked, "We can't keep doing this." I was aware. I still knew I didn't want to give up. Not now. Not when I had only just began to feel as though my body belonged to me once more. Not when someone finally noticed how I moved, how I breathed, how I slowed my steps when I didn't want to leave. My husband and I sat through dinner later that evening, just the three of us, like though nothing had happened in the garden. I passed on the salad. He poured the wine. Repainting the kitchen cabinets was something my spouse asked about our view on. We each nodded and answered in order. Though the dance was flawless, I could still feel the under-the-table intensity. Though our knees didn't touch, I knew I wouldn't move away should they. After supper, my husband went to the den to view something he had recorded. Holding a dish towel in one hand, I stood in the entrance observing the two men in my life breathing the same air under the same roof. One of them's loyalty pushed him to love me. The other wanted me since he couldn't help himself. It was the most awful kind of intimacy. My spouse touched my shoulder that night in bed. His fingers were fragile, tentative. I gazed at him not out of obligation, but rather because I wanted to know, had to remember what this was supposed to feel like. He kissed me. I let him, but my body did not react. Not as it formerly did. The garden sprang to mind, to calloused hands on my waist, to kisses that burned and endured. I closed my eyes and let the time pass. I touched something in the dark that terrified me. Being caught didn't bother me. I was afraid I might not. The following days unfolded with false tranquility. I prepared meals, responded to emails, folded laundry with unwavering accuracy, and completed my tasks like clockwork. I kissed my spouse when he left for work. I asked about his day when he returned. From the outside, I was the same. Inside, something fundamental had been shifted, like furniture in a room I could no longer cross in the dark. My body had a memory that would not go away, and more, it did not want to. Every part of me still remembered the pressure of his hand at my waist, the deliberate slowness of his breath, the warmth between his fingers and the small of my back. These were not just moments. They had become into sensations that stayed with me like scent on skin. I felt them in the quiet before sleep, in the serenity of the afternoon, in the absence of all other items. He did not begin anything after that second kiss, not physically either. But we orbited one another ceaselessly in the way his gaze lingered when I entered the room, in how I found reasons to be alone in the yard or the laundry room, places he could also happen to pass through. A hidden thread vibrating with tension connected us closely over distance. It was not desire, it wasn't affection, it was recognition. Then came the unanticipated shift. My hubby began to notice me again unannounced. Not in big ways, not in declarations or surprises, but in subtle, uncomfortable gestures of attentiveness. One evening, he brought home my preferred wine. Unprompted, he claimed he would bring me to the art exhibition I had hinted at weeks earlier. At night, he held me longer and kissed me more fully. Waking in the early hours to find him just observing me, his palm resting on my hip as if trying to remember its curve, a part of me wanted to let him. The other side, the one that had reawakened under someone else's touch, remained silent. During breakfast on a Thursday morning, he brought it up. "You have been somewhat distant lately." The spoon in my hand floated above the yogurt dish. I remarked, "Just weary." "You are not just tired. You are somewhere else." I did not answer. He didn't push, but I felt it in the room after that, an awareness creeping in, slowly and invasively. My husband was noticing the cracks. Later that day, I looked in the corridor mirror and couldn't recognize the expression in my own eyes. It wasn't guilt. It was not humiliation. It was conflict. A difficult, unpleasant item not to settle. My marriage had not collapsed. My partner had not disappointed me. He stayed here, stayed courteous, and kept trying in his methodical, quiet way. That, though, made the problem worse. I had not been trying. I had not been fighting to bring us back. Though it was wrong, I had succumbed too quickly to the pull of something that revitalized me. That night my stepfather and I were once more alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. My husband in the living room, headphones on, absorbed in some documentary. I was rinsing the dishes. He was drying them. Although the air between us was dense, our hands moved in practiced rhythm. Ignoring me, he placed a plate on the rack and remarked, "I'm leaving Sunday." My chest started to stiffen. "Where at?" "Return to Lisbon. My flat remains there. Work remains." I turned the water off. The wash basin gurgled once and then fell silent. "You didn't mention anything before." Finally, he looked at me. Though his eyes weren't, his face was serene. "I didn't know till this morning. Received an email. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it." I dried my hands with a dish towel that surprisingly felt too thin. "Why didn't you tell me right away? Should I stay if I did?" I looked away. My fingers were gripping the towel's fabric too tightly. He came closer, but not close enough to touch. He said, "None of this bothers me. It's become a wound, though, and remaining will just keep me opening it." Though they should have hurt, his comments did not. Not as I imagined. What hurt more was how right, how adult, how definitive they were. Finally, I turned to him and asked, "What do you want me to do?" "You should choose what you require. Should that be him, I shall honor it. If not, don't stay out of habit. Lying to yourself only because it is easier is not worthwhile." Not trusting myself to talk, I nodded once. I didn't sleep that night. Lying awake, staring at the ceiling, I could hear the steady breath of the man next to me, good, loyal, present in all the necessary ways. I turned only enough to see his profile in the moonlight. He appeared to be calm, quiet, and reliable. I felt like an alien in my own home. By daylight, I had made a choice I could not reverse. Not quite an action, but a shift. Something internal, a lightening of the ties tying me to one version of myself. Dressed gently, I rose before dawn and descended to the porch. Already there, sitting with a bag at his feet, he saw the sky shrink at the borders. "You are early," I said. "So are you." We never said goodbye. We didn't have to, though. His eyes searched mine for a long time before dropping to my still naked hand, fingers somewhat curled at my side. He nodded once, a sign that said everything we had not had time to say. Then he got up, took his bags, and walked down the path, ignoring back glances. I stayed on the porch long after his car had disappeared down the street. In my hand, my coffee grew cold. My body still remembered his warmth, but inside, something else had also started to cool. Merely the little growing feeling that nothing would be the same again and that I had changed it. No regret, no clarity. The days following his departure hung like damp linen on a clothesline, heavy, slow to dry, clinging to the smallest memory wind. I swam through them as though under sea. Everything seems familiar yet distant. Though no one had asked for it, I refilled the sugar container, answered business emails with hollow enthusiasm, and folded towels with machine precision. The vibrations anchored me. The emptiness inside me expanded slowly. The sudden return to normalcy appeared to relieve my spouse. Naturally, he didn't say it out loud. He wasn't the sort, but his expressions grew softer. He stopped asking during breakfast. He said nothing about my fidgeting or my silences. Perhaps he believed whatever had shattered in me had begun to seal. He might have mistaken absence for closure. Absence is not, however, tranquilly. It's just quiet. The envelope came next. Late Thursday afternoon, clouds filled the sky, the kind that hang low and diminish everything. Among the usual chaos, catalogs, a bill, a dentist reminder, the mail delivered a white unmarked envelope with my name written in that unmistakable slanted, clean, European script. Held in both hands at the kitchen counter, my fingers pressed the edges. Afraid to open, afraid not to. Inside was one page, folded once. No greeting, no date. Printed, only a quick note. Spare, I didn't stay. I left believing in us. Sitting down slowly, the letter in my hands trembled. Those words' weight slammed into my chest like rock. He wasn't begging. He was not in charge. In a sea of half-lived conversations, he had only offered me one truth, something pure. I didn't tell my husband. I could not. Not because I was defending the affair, but because I no longer trusted myself to talk about it without wanting it back. That night, as we lay down, he turned to me and put a hand under the duvet on my waist. Soft was his touch, a sign he hadn't used in weeks. "I have missed you," he said softly. I did not respond right away. The ceiling above us glowed faintly from the streetlight outside. I looked at the shadows on the wall. My body tensed not in denial, but in anticipation of the falsehood I would have to speak. I eventually remarked, "I've been here," and hated how hollow the words seemed. As he drew closer, he kissed my shoulder. "I get it, but sometimes it looks like you aren't." There was no fee, only observation. It hurt more than any uncertainty would have. Later, I lay up for hours, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling while he drifted off. Every scenario I replayed was the back seat of the automobile where our legs had touched but never intertwined, the garden, the porch, the kiss of the cedar tree, the tranquility of the drive home. I recalled how his eyes had narrowed as he saw me speak, with whole presence, not suspiciously or possessively. That kind of concentration stays under your skin. It alters you. Then I realized I was not mourning the end of the affair. I mourned the return to invisibility. The next morning, I rose early. Not to cook, not to clean, but to move. I sought proof of life, movement, and fresh air. I left a note on the counter claiming I went for a stroll. Back soon. I did not walk the trail of the park. I didn't walk towards the shops. I strolled instead into the historic portion of town where the pavements broke at the edges and brick structures leaned together like talking elders. I walked past a closed cafe with filthy chairs still stacked inside, a second-hand storefront crammed with clocks, all displaying different times. I landed up at a small train station I had not meant to find. I stood there watching people board the morning queue, all certain of where they had to be heading. Years had passed since I had felt such confidence. I sat on a seat and looked at the tracks until my coffee in my hands turned cold. I did not want to run. I didn't want to abandon my life. I just wanted to really feel that I had some control over it. That night, my husband suggested we depart together. Just the two of us, perhaps next weekend. That site you liked beside the lake. I was grateful for the suggestion and nodded, but something in me recoiled. Returning to a site packed with old memories and pretending to make new ones on top was like burying still warm flames under snow. I said I'll check my calendar and left it at that. Lips brushing my forehead, he said goodnight. Long after the lights went out, I lay in bed going over the letter's words. I departed because I did. That line ripped apart in my thoughts like thread, pulling at all I had thought was securely sewed. I flipped it over and over not for hope or regret, but rather because it reminded me of the very need to be wanted that drove someone to leave to safeguard what he felt. And then it struck me. My spouse had never fought for me. Not really. He had lived next to me, saved me, and protected me. The man who kissed me beneath the trees, though, had seen the storm in me and had stepped into it. I did not cry. The letter was never touched by me again. I just knew I would never go back to who I was before it arrived. Following the letter, I began to see the smallest nuances more clearly. Rhythmic stairway footsteps, the soft clink of a spoon in a ceramic cup, the split second of uncertainty before my husband touched my back. Life had returned to its usual shape, yet nothing about it now sat quite right. It felt like wearing a borrowed coat. Familiar in cut, but maybe too snug in the arms. Once again, he said nothing about the weekend away. I think he could feel me pulling inside like a tide that had decided to remain offshore. He tried to set the table early in his own manner, text me all day to see in, and ask if I wanted to start reading a book with him at night. They were thoughtful deeds. They might have worked 6 months ago, but now they looked like applying cosmetics on a shattered mirror. It did not fix the break. It just hid it for a while. Though I continued with the dinners, the smiles, the surface conversations, I couldn't help but shake when I was alone. But from the realization that I had entered a life I could never undo, not from fear, not even from want. I found myself reading the letter again in the calm areas of the day. Once in the washing room with the door nearly closed. Another time in the pantry when I pretended to be rearranging jars. Though I never cried reading it, my heart ached in a way I couldn't articulate, like a stretched violin string waiting for sound that never came. The incident that undid me was not remarkable. It has nothing to do with him, though. It came from a single sentence my spouse spoke while we were watching television. "You seem to be getting better lately." Trying not to react, I blinked slowly. In what way improved? Simply lighter, as though you were sleeping more, not as stressed. Though said with empathy, what I heard underneath was what he could not see. Everything I had managed to hide under courteous dinner conversations, immaculate linens, and filthy dishes. That night in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, I gazed into the mirror at my own eyes. Then I understood what I had been avoiding for weeks. I could stay, and nothing would collapse. I would still be married. My husband would stay constant, nice, and cordial in his attitude. But within that opulence, I would be quietly vanishing. Fully clothed, I lay motionless next him, listening to his breath even out in sleep. Remember to like the video, leave your opinions, and subscribe to be informed on our most recent articles. I never imagined that night would alter my perspective on all, my career, my decisions, and especially the man I had worked beside for more than 10 years. But certain times sneak up on you when you least expect them, unfolding like a perfectly timed symphony, each note hitting something deep inside of you. It began as a typical evening. The city's lights sparkled through the broad glass windows of the rooftop venue. The annual business gala had just finished. Stepping outside, breathing the fresh night air, thankful to be away from the commotion, the laughing of colleagues still rang in my ears. Reminders of the long hours spent standing and smiling, my heels pinched somewhat. Leaving already? I turned to find him, James Carter, my supervisor for the last 12 years. Silver at the temples, smartly dressed, and always carried himself with the confidence of a guy who has built something from the ground up. Though something in his expression that evening seemed altered, at 61 he was as calm and collected as always. "Just getting some air," I said, smiling slightly. Stepping next to me with his hands in his pockets, he said, "That was quite a party." His typical sense of authority softened by the streetlight shine. "It was, but I'll be honest. These events aren't really my thing," I said with a laugh. "Funny, you run them every year." "That's just business," he replied, bending his head slightly toward me. "You, on the other hand, really look to be enjoying yourself." I gave up. I guess I've picked up how to act. He chuckled softly, and for a while we stood in quiet contentment. Though the city buzzed all around us, in that little pocket of time there was only the two of us, side by side, free from the organized formalities of the office. Then came the words I had not anticipated. He said, "I'm not ready to leave home yet. Care to join me for a drink?" I was unsure. We often spoke outside of work, late-night calls, strategy sessions running into the evening, but this seemed unique. His tone had something unspoken that slightly quickened my heart rate. I eventually said, "Sure. Why not?" Away from the bright-lit towers of downtown and into a quieter section of the city, we went along the street. He took me to a tiny lounge with low lighting and mellow jazz playing in the background, cozy. It was the sort of location that seemed ageless, unaffected by the outside world's bustle. He untied his tie as we got comfortable in a corner booth, a move I had seldom observed. He gazed at me, actually gazed at me, as though viewing me in a different light. Swirling the amber liquid in his glass, he remarked, "You've been with the firm a long time." I nodded. 12 years. "Have you ever thought about how different life would have been had you taken another path?" His question took me by surprise. "Are you wondering whether I regret my decisions?" He shook his head in disapproval. "Just curiosity, not sorrow. Do you ever think about the roads not taken?" I let out a slow breath. I believe we all do at some point, but I've always felt that every choice, every turn we take, takes us precisely where we're supposed to be. He found that amusing. That's a smart perspective on issues. For the first time in years, we conversed, really discussed. Nor about work, nor about deadlines or quarterly reports, but about living. He told me about his early years, the difficulties of starting the business, the sacrifices that followed. I also contributed bits of myself, the aspirations I once had, the experiences that formed me. Time became hazy. From 1 drink to 2 to 3, the air between us changed somewhere between nostalgia and hilarity. Hesitant and looking, he stretched over the table, fingertips brushing the back of my hand. I did not withdraw. There was a pause, a suspended breath where everything hung in the balance. And then gently, he said, "I never told you this, but I've always admired you, beyond just your work. You have this presence, this way of making the world feel grounded even when all else is chaos." My heart raced a bit. Though I was no stranger to praise, this seemed unusual. It was something genuine, something deeper than flattery. It wasn't flattery. "You have always been the one constant," he said. Perhaps it took me too long to understand exactly how important that is. I gulped, not knowing what to say back. He was a guy I had respected for years, not only my boss. His opinion meant more to me than I wanted to admit. But sitting there in the warmth of that softly lit lounge, I wasn't thinking about work or professionalism. I was considering how he stared at me, as though seeing, being, a lady he had not let himself really see prior. "I should probably go home," I finally murmured, my voice lacking confidence. He looked at me for a long time before he nodded. "Allow me to guide you." Before I came down, he made morning coffee. The air stank of cinnamon toast and compromise. From opposite sides of the kitchen island, we sipped gently and stopped pretending we were okay. Later that day, I called a realtor. Not yet did I tell him. I asked, took notes. Opening closets I hadn't touched in years, I considered what I would save and what I would let go. I finally did that evening what I had been putting off. Once more, I removed the letter. Carefully unfolding it, I ran the edge of my hand over the crease to smooth it out. Though the paper had began to soften with time and rereading, the ink remained. Reading the sentences out loud, nearly whispering, I didn't stay as I lacked confidence in us. I departed since I did. I folded it once more into a little, worn square placed in the back of my journal rather than an envelope. Not because I had to keep him, but because I had to recall who I was when I read it the first time. The woman who realized she was merely lost, not broken. That loss was not permanent. That was a map. Weeks became days. He and I discussed more honestly about practicalities, time frames, what would stay and what would leave. There were no blowouts, simply gentle unwinding. Still, in the quiet, I thought about the garden, the cedar bench, the way the wind had caught the hem of my shirt the day he kissed me. I didn't dream of it. I did not seek it. But I appreciated it since the kiss hadn't destroyed anything. It had shown something I could still desire, still able to be wanted. On the last morning before the movers arrived, I stood at the entrance of what had once been our bedroom. The bed empty, the furnishings marked for sorting. I stood for a long time remembering the hundreds of nights I had spent there, both with someone and still alone. Stepping outdoors barefoot onto the porch where the early light had already begun to warm the planks, though overgrown now, the garden was nonetheless beautiful in its neglect. I sat on the cedar under the seat, the same one where I'd previously kissed a guy who had, unintentionally, changed the direction of my life. Not out of love, but mainly because he saw me. Now I was learning how to do the same. I did not cry. I didn't look back when I finally stood and stepped inside. Not every story ends with big gestures. Some end with a woman finally choosing herself. Quietly, completely. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real beginning.